The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a gentle shudder. Commander Jack Morrison stood at the observation window of the Earth vessel Starfall and looked at the planet below. Valora Prime was beautiful in a dangerous way. Its surface was covered in swirling purple clouds, and beneath those clouds lay oceans of acid that could melt steel in seconds. The Valorians had built their cities on massive floating platforms above those deadly seas. It was a world that demanded strength from its people, and the Valorians had answered that demand by becoming one of the most feared warrior races in the known galaxy. Jack was 42 years old. His hair had started to turn gray at the temples, and his face carried the lines of a man who had seen too many battles and buried too many friends. He had served in Earth's deep space fleet for 15 years, starting as a young pilot fresh out of the academy and working his way up through blood and sacrifice. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belts of the outer colonies. He had survived the Battle of Kepler Station, where 300 human soldiers held off an invasion force for 11 days until reinforcements arrived. He had walked through fire and come out the other side still breathing. Now Earth had sent him to Valora Prime as their sole representative to the Galactic Summit. It was a gathering of 37 spacefaring species, a place where the powerful races of the galaxy made decisions that shaped the future of countless worlds. Humanity was new to this stage. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 60 years ago, and to the ancient races of the galaxy, humans were still children. Weak children. Fragile creatures from a small blue world at the edge of nowhere. Jack understood why Earth had chosen him for this mission. They needed someone who would not be afraid. Someone who could stand in a room full of aliens who looked down on humanity and not flinch. Someone who had already faced death so many times that the threat of it no longer held any power. His pilot, Katie Shaw, walked up beside him. She was 30 years old, with short red hair and sharp green eyes. She had served under Jack for 5 years and trusted him with her life. "The Valorians have sent docking coordinates," she said. "They want us to land on Platform 7. That's where the summit is being held." Jack nodded. "Take us in." Danny Reyes, the communications officer, looked up from his station. He was the youngest member of the crew, only 25, with a nervous energy that never seemed to fade. "Commander, I've been monitoring their channels. There's a lot of chatter about us. Most of it isn't friendly." "What are they saying?" Jack asked. Danny hesitated. "They're calling us soft. Weak." One of them said watching a human try to participate in galactic politics would be like watching a child play with adults. Jack smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Let them talk." The starfall descended through the purple clouds and emerged above a city of gleaming towers and vast open arenas. Valorian architecture was all sharp angles and aggressive designs, buildings that looked like weapons pointing at the sky. The docking platform was crowded with ships from dozens of different species. Jack saw the massive battle cruisers of the Thaxian Empire, the elegant curved vessels of the Luminary Collective, and the jagged black ships of the Korath Dominion. Humanity's single small vessel looked almost sad in comparison. They landed without incident, and Jack made his way to the exit ramp. Katie caught his arm before he left. "Jack," she said quietly, "be careful. The Valorians respect strength above everything else. If you show any weakness, they'll eat you alive." "I know," Jack said. "That's why I won't show any." He walked down the ramp and onto the platform. The air was thick and warm, carrying a faint chemical smell from the acid oceans far below. A delegation of Valorians waited for him. They were impressive creatures, standing 8 feet tall on average, with bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted color in the light. Each Valorian had 4 muscular arms and eyes that glowed with a soft golden light. They moved with the confidence of apex predators, beings who had never known what it meant to be prey. At the front of the delegation stood a female Valorian who was clearly royalty. Her scales were a deep royal purple, and she wore armor decorated with gems and precious metals. Her 4 arms were thick with muscle, and her golden eyes looked at Jack the way a hawk might look at a mouse. This was Princess Kalith Vorshan, daughter of the High King, undefeated champion of the Valorian combat arenas. She had killed her first enemy in ritual combat at the age of 12. Since then, she had faced over 200 challengers and defeated every single one. Many of those challengers had not survived. So, Kaleth said, her voice deep and resonant. This is the human. She walked in a slow circle around Jack, examining him like he was an interesting insect. Smaller than I expected. Softer too. Are all your people so fragile? Jack met her eyes without flinching. We manage. Kaleth laughed. It was not a friendly sound. You manage. How cute. Tell me, human, how did your species survive long enough to reach the stars? On your world, are there no predators? No dangers? You look like you would die from a strong breeze. The other Valorians laughed at her words. Jack remained calm. He had expected this. Every report about Valorian culture had warned him that they would test him from the moment he arrived. We had plenty of predators, Jack said evenly. We killed them all. The laughter stopped. Kaleth's eyes narrowed slightly. For a moment, something flickered across her face. It might have been surprise. It might have been the first tiny seed of respect, but then it was gone, replaced by cold amusement. Bold words from such a small creature, she said. I look forward to seeing if your actions match your tongue. The opening ceremony of the Galactic Summit was held in a massive arena at the center of the city. Representatives from all 37 species gathered in a circle around a raised platform where speakers would address the assembly. Jack stood in humanity's designated spot, alone among giants. The smallest representative there, surrounded by beings who could crush him with a single blow. The High King of Valora, Kaleth's father, welcomed everyone to the summit. He was ancient by Valorian standards. His scales faded to a pale silver, but his voice still carried the power of a born ruler. He spoke of cooperation between species, of trade agreements and mutual defense pacts, of the future of the galaxy. Then Kaleth stepped forward. She had not been scheduled to speak, but no one tried to stop her. She walked to the center of the platform and looked directly at Jack. Before we discuss the future, she announced, we must address the present. There is a species among us that does not belong. Humanity. She gestured toward Jack with one of her forearms. These creatures are weak. They are soft. They have contributed nothing to the galactic community. They have no great fleets, no powerful weapons, no ancient wisdom. They are children pretending to sit at the table of adults. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some of the other species nodded in agreement. Others watched with curious interest. Jack stepped forward. His voice was calm and clear. Princess Kaleth, I request that you withdraw your insult. The arena fell completely silent. Kaleth stared at him. Then she smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Withdraw? No. Human. I do not withdraw. Instead, I offer you a chance to prove me wrong. She raised all four arms. I invoke the right of dominance. Single combat. Your species against mine. If you win, humanity takes its place among the stars as equals. If you lose, your people leave this summit in shame and do not return for 100 years. Jack knew what the right of dominance meant. He had studied Valorian culture extensively. No one had ever survived a right against a member of the royal family. He looked at Kaleth. He thought about Katie and Danny waiting for him back on the ship. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who were counting on him to secure humanity's future. I accept, he said. Kaleth's smile widened. You won't last a minute, human. Jack said nothing. He simply waited. He had been underestimated before. He had been called weak before. And he was still standing while those who had mocked him were dust and memory. Tomorrow, he would fight. And the galaxy would learn what it truly meant to be human. The night before the fight was the longest of Jack's life. He sat alone in his quarters aboard the Starfall, staring at the wall and thinking about what tomorrow would bring. The room was small and plain, just a bed and a desk and a small window that looked out at the alien city. Purple light from Valora Prime's strange sky filtered through the glass and painted shadows across the floor. Katie came to see him around midnight. She did not knock. She just opened the door and walked in and sat down on the edge of his bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You could still withdraw," she finally said. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "No one would blame you. The Valorians gave you until sunrise to change your mind." Jack shook his head slowly. "If I withdraw, humanity loses its chance at the Council for 100 years. That's 4 generations, Katie. 4 generations of humans growing up knowing that their ancestors were too afraid to fight for their place in the galaxy. And if you die tomorrow, what happens then?" Jack turned to look at her. Her eyes were red, and he realized she had been crying. Katie Shaw, the toughest pilot he had ever known, the woman who had flown through asteroid fields and enemy fire without blinking, had been crying for him. "Then you take the ship home," he said gently. "You tell them what happened. And you make sure humanity never forgets." Katie grabbed his hand and held it tight. "You better not die, Jack. You hear me? You better not die." He squeezed her hand back. "I'll do my best." She stayed with him until the first light of morning crept through the window. Then she left to prepare the ship, and Jack began to prepare himself. He did not put on armor. The Valorians had offered him some, a ceremonial suit that would provide basic protection. But he refused. Armor would slow him down, and speed was the only advantage he might have. Instead, he wore his standard flight suit, the same simple gray uniform he had worn through a dozen battles. It was comfortable, it was familiar, and it reminded him of who he was. The combat arena was located on a platform that floated above the acid oceans, separate from the main city. Jack was transported there by a small shuttle along with Danny, who had insisted on coming to watch. Katie stayed with the ship in orbit, monitoring everything through the communication link. "The whole galaxy is watching," Danny said as the shuttle approached the arena. His voice was shaky. "Every species at the summit has sent observers. This is being broadcast to hundreds of worlds." Jack looked out the window at the arena below. It was a circular platform about 100 meters across, made of some kind of white stone that gleamed in the morning light. There were no walls, no barriers, just a flat surface surrounded by empty air and the deadly oceans far below. Thousands of spectators filled floating observation platforms that circled the arena like satellites. "Good," Jack said quietly. "Let them watch." The shuttle landed at the edge of the arena. Jack stepped out onto the white stone and felt the warm wind against his face. The air smelled of chemicals and salt. Far below, the purple acid seas churned and bubbled, sending up clouds of toxic vapor that the wind carried away. Princess Kalith was already waiting at the center of the platform. She had changed from her ceremonial armor into combat gear, a lighter suit that still covered her vital areas but allowed full movement of her forearms. In each hand, she held a curved plasma blade. The weapons hummed with energy, their edges glowing a soft blue that promised instant death. The High King stood on an observation platform directly above the arena. His voice boomed through speakers that carried to every corner of the gathering. "Today we witness the right of dominance. Princess Kalith Vorshan of Valora challenges Commander Jack Morrison of Earth. The rules are simple. The fight continues until one combatant yields or dies. There are no restrictions. There is no mercy protocol. May the strongest prevail." Jack walked toward the center of the arena. He could feel the eyes of thousands upon him. He could feel their doubt, their mockery, their certainty that they were about to watch a slaughter. Kalith twirled her plasma blades in complex patterns, the weapons singing through the air. She was showing off, demonstrating her skill, trying to intimidate him before the fight even began. "I want you to know," she said, loud enough for the nearest observers to hear, "that I take no pleasure in this. Killing something as weak as you brings no honor. But you challenged me, human. You forced my hand." Jack stopped about 10 meters away from her. He stood with his hands at his sides, empty. He had no weapons. He had no armor. He had only himself. "I did not challenge you," he said calmly. "You challenged me. You insulted my people. I simply accepted your invitation." Kalith's golden eyes narrowed. Semantics. The result will be the same. A horn sounded across the arena, deep and resonant. The fight had begun. Kaleth moved faster than anything Jack had ever seen. She crossed the distance between them in less than a second. All four arms striking simultaneously. Plasma blades cutting through the air in deadly arcs. Any one of those strikes would have killed him instantly. Jack had been watching her. From the moment he stepped onto the platform, he had been studying the way she moved, the way she held her weapons, the way she shifted her weight. He had memorized her body language, calculated her reach, estimated her speed. At the last possible instant, he moved. He did not try to block her attacks. That would have been suicide. Instead, he twisted his body and stepped to the side, letting her blades pass within centimeters of his flesh. He felt the heat of the plasma against his skin, close enough to leave a slight burn. The crowd gasped. Kaleth stumbled forward, carried by her own momentum. She had expected to hit him. She had expected him to die in the first second. Instead, she had struck nothing but air. She spun around, her scales flushing a darker shade of purple. Anger. He had made her angry. Lucky, she hissed. You were lucky. Jack said nothing. He simply watched her, waiting. She attacked again, this time more carefully. She used 2 arms to strike, while keeping 2 in reserve, ready to counter any movement he made. It was a smarter approach, more controlled. Jack dodged again, and again, and again. He moved like water, flowing around her attacks, never quite where she expected him to be. It was not magic. It was not superhuman ability. It was simply the result of thousands of hours of training, of learning to read opponents, of understanding that survival often meant being somewhere else when death arrived. But he could not dodge forever. On her 5th attack, one of her blades caught his left arm. The plasma cut through his flight suit and into his flesh, leaving a deep gash that immediately began to bleed. The crowd cheered. First blood to the princess. Jack gritted his teeth against the pain and kept moving. Blood ran down his arm and dripped onto the white stone, leaving a trail of red wherever he stepped. Kaleth smiled. There it is. The weakness of your kind. You bleed so easily, human. How much more can you lose before you fall? Jack looked at his wound. The pain was sharp and hot, but he had felt worse, much worse. More than you think, he said. She came at him again, and again, and again. The fight continued. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. Jack bled from cuts on his arm, his shoulder, his side. Each wound slowed him a little more, made his movements a little less precise. But he was still standing, still moving, still refusing to fall. The crowd had grown quiet. They had expected a quick death. Instead, they were watching something they had never seen before. A human, small and soft and bleeding, somehow surviving against the greatest warrior Valora had ever produced. Kaleth's attacks grew more vicious, more desperate. She could not understand how he was still alive. She could not understand why he would not just die, like he was supposed to. And somewhere in the back of her mind, in a place she would never admit existed, Princess Kaleth Vorshan began to feel the first cold touch of doubt. The fight had been going for 30 minutes. Jack Morrison was covered in blood. He had cuts on both arms now. A deep gash ran across his ribs where one of Kaleth's blades had come dangerously close to his heart. His left eye was swollen shut from a blow he had not quite managed to avoid. Every breath sent sharp pain through his chest, and he suspected at least 2 of his ribs were cracked. But he was still standing. The white stone of the arena was stained red with his blood. It pooled in the cracks between the stones, spread by his dragging footsteps. He moved slower now, his body screaming at him to stop, to rest, to surrender. But Jack Morrison had never learned how to surrender. Kaleth stood across from him, breathing hard. Her 4 arms hung at her sides. The plasma blades still clutched in her hands but no longer spinning with their earlier energy. Her scales had lost some of their shine, dulled by exhaustion. Sweat ran down her face and dripped from her chin. She was tired. The realization hit the watching crowd slowly, spreading through the observation platforms like a wave. The Princess of Valora, the undefeated champion, was tired. And the human was still standing. "Why won't you fall?" Kalith demanded. Her voice was rough, strained. "You should be dead. Any other creature in the galaxy would be dead by now. Why won't you just fall?" Jack wiped blood from his good eye with the back of his hand. His voice came out as a rasp, but his words were clear. "You don't understand humans. I understand enough. You are weak. Your bodies are fragile. You have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. You are prey animals who somehow stumbled into space." Jack laughed. It hurt his ribs, but he laughed anyway. "That is exactly what you don't understand." He took a step toward her. Just one step. But it was enough to make her tense. To make her raise her blades again. "Millions of years ago," Jack said, "humans lived on a planet full of things that wanted to kill us. Lions, tigers, bears, wolves, creatures with claws and fangs and speed that we could never match. You know how we survived?" Kalith did not answer. "We did not fight them with strength." Jack continued. "We could not. We were exactly what you said. Weak and soft and slow. So we learned to fight differently. We learned to endure." He took another step. Blood dripped from his wounds, but his eyes never left hers. "On Earth, we have a hunting technique called persistence hunting. We would pick an animal, something faster and stronger than us, and we would chase it. Not quickly, we could never catch it in a sprint. But we did not need to. We would walk after it. Hour after hour, day after day. The animal would run, and we would walk. It would hide, and we would find it. It would rest, and we would keep coming." The arena was completely silent now. Every observer, from every species, was listening. "Eventually," Jack said, "the animal would collapse. Not from our weapons. Not from our strength. From exhaustion. Because humans are the greatest endurance hunters the Earth has ever produced. Our bodies are designed to keep going long after other creatures have given up. We sweat to cool ourselves when others overheat. We store energy in ways that let us function for days, without food. We heal from wounds that would kill most species." He was close to her now, close enough to see the sweat on her scales, the trembling in her forearms. "You were right about one thing," he said quietly. "Humans are not built for quick fights. We are not built for overwhelming strength. We are built to last, to endure, to keep going when everything else has stopped. You wanted to defeat me in a minute. But minutes are not where humans fight. We fight in hours, in days, in years, in generations. One. I. One. Kalith attacked again. It was a desperate strike, lacking the precision and power of her earlier blows. Jack sidestepped, slower than before but still fast enough. Her blade caught his shoulder, cutting deep. But he did not fall. He grabbed her arm with his good hand and pulled, using her own momentum against her. She stumbled. For the first time in the fight, Princess Kalith Vorshan stumbled. The crowd made a sound, a collective intake of breath that echoed across the floating platforms. Kalith recovered quickly and spun to face him, her eyes wild with something that looked almost like fear. "What are you?" she whispered. "I am human," Jack said simply. "And humans do not give up." She came at him again, all four arms swinging. But her movements were sloppy now, driven by frustration and exhaustion, rather than skill. Jack took another cut across his chest. He felt the plasma blade burn through his flesh, smelled his own blood cooking from the heat. The pain was enormous, a white-hot fire that threatened to overwhelm his senses. He did not stop. He had been trained to ignore pain. Every human soldier learned that lesson. Pain was information, nothing more. It told you that your body was damaged, but it did not control you. You controlled it. You acknowledged it, and then you set it aside and kept fighting. Jack Morrison had been shot twice in his career. He had been stabbed once. He had been burned in an engine fire that had killed 3 of his crewmates. He had walked through hell and come out the other side. This was just another fire to walk through. 45 minutes. The fight had been going for 45 minutes. Kalith could barely lift her arms now. Her plasma blades dragged along the ground, leaving scorch marks on the white stone. Her breathing came in great gasping heaves, her body desperately trying to recover from exertion it had never experienced before. She had never fought for this long. No Valorian had ever needed to. Their battles were quick and decisive, won with overwhelming power in the first moments. They were sprinters, designed for explosive strength. Jack was a marathon runner, and the marathon was only half over. "Yield," he said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "There is no shame in yielding." Kalith's head snapped up. Her golden eyes blazed with fury. "I am a princess of Valora. I have never yielded. I will never yield." "Then we keep going," Jack said. "As long as it takes." He raised his fists. His left arm could barely move, the muscles damaged by multiple cuts. His chest was a map of wounds. He had lost so much blood that a normal person would have passed out long ago. But Jack Morrison was not a normal person. He was human. And humans had spent millions of years learning how to survive when survival should have been impossible. The fight continued. And slowly, inevitably, the galaxy began to understand what it truly meant to face a human who refused to die. 57 minutes. The fight had lasted 57 minutes. Jack could barely see. His good eye was clouded with blood and sweat, and his swollen eye had completely sealed shut. He moved by instinct now. His body, operating on memories burned into his muscles through years of training. Every part of him hurt. Every breath was agony. His left arm hung useless at his side, the bones broken from a strike he had failed to avoid completely. But Kalith was worse. The Princess of Valora stood in the center of the arena, swaying like a tree in a storm. Her 4 arms trembled violently, the muscles pushed far beyond their limits. She had dropped 2 of her plasma blades because she no longer had the strength to hold them. The remaining 2 hung loose in her grip, their tips dragging against the blood-stained stone. Her scales had gone pale, almost white. Her golden eyes were dim, the light fading as her body desperately tried to conserve energy. She was breathing so hard that she could not speak, great heaving gasps that shook her entire frame. Jack watched her and felt something unexpected. Pity. Despite everything she had said, everything she had done, he felt sorry for her. She had been raised to believe that strength was everything, that power was the only measure of worth, and now she was learning, in the most painful way possible, that there was more than one kind of strength. She tried to raise her blades. Her arms made it halfway up before they fell back to her sides. She tried again. Same result. "It's over," Jack said quietly. "You have nothing left." Kalith made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. "Then kill me. That is how the right ends. Victory or death. There is no other way. There is always another way." She shook her head weakly. "You do not understand Valorian honor. If I yield to you, I am nothing. My family is shamed for 10 generations. I would rather die." Jack took a step toward her, then another. She tried to raise her blades again, a final desperate defense, but her body simply would not obey. The weapons slipped from her fingers and clattered against the stone. He stood in front of her now, close enough to touch, close enough to kill. One strike to her throat would end it. One blow to her temple would send her tumbling from the platform into the acid seas below. The right demanded blood, and he had earned the right to take hers. Instead, he reached out and caught her as her legs finally gave way. The crowd erupted in confusion. Shouts and cries echoed across the floating platforms. The Valorians roared in outrage. Other species watched in stunned silence. No one understood what was happening. Jack lowered Kalith gently to the ground. She looked up at him with eyes full of confusion and something that might have been terror. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Jack knelt beside her. His body screamed at him to rest, to collapse, to finally let go. But he stayed upright. He had one more thing to do. "I did not come here to kill you," he said. "I came here to prove that humanity deserves a place among the stars. And we do not earn that place through murder. But the right says the fight continues until one combatant yields or dies. It says nothing about the winner being required to kill." He reached down and took her hand in his. His broken fingers closed around her scaled palm. "I could kill you right now," he said, loud enough for the observers to hear. "I could claim victory through your death. But I won't. Because humans understand something that your culture has forgotten. True strength is not about destroying your enemies. True strength is knowing when to show mercy." He pulled gently on her hand. It took all the strength he had left, but he helped her rise to her feet. She leaned against him, unable to stand on her own. The princess of the most powerful warrior race in the galaxy, being held up by a bleeding human who should have died an hour ago. The arena was silent. Every observer, from every species, watched without breathing. The High King of Valora rose from his seat on the observation platform. His ancient face was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on the impossible scene below. "Commander Jack Morrison," he said, his voice booming through the speakers. "You have won the right of dominance. My daughter is defeated. By the laws of our ancestors, you may claim her life." Jack looked up at the king. "I claim nothing but what I came here for. Humanity's place at the council. Nothing more. And my daughter's life? Her life is her own. I have no interest in it." A murmur ran through the crowd. The Valorians looked at each other in disbelief. In all the centuries of the right of dominance, no victor had ever refused to kill. It was unheard of. It was impossible. It was human. The High King was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "So be it. The right is concluded. Humanity has earned its place among the stars." He paused. And when he spoke again, there was something different in his voice. Something that sounded almost like respect. "You are a strange people, humans. Weak and soft and fragile. And yet you have done what no other species has done in 1,000 years. You have defeated a champion of Valora and then shown her mercy." Jack's legs were shaking now. The adrenaline that had kept him going was fading, and the full weight of his injuries was crashing down on him. He could feel himself starting to fall. Then there were arms around him. 4 arms. Kalith was holding him up, just as he had held her up moments before. "You fool," she said quietly, her voice rough with exhaustion. "You absolute fool. You could have had everything. Glory. Power. The right to command the respect of every species in the galaxy. Instead, you chose mercy." "Mercy is not weakness," Jack managed to say. "It is the greatest strength there is." She helped him walk to the edge of the platform, where a medical shuttle was descending to take him away. Behind them, the crowd was finally beginning to react, thousands of voices rising in a chaotic mixture of disbelief and wonder. As the shuttle's doors opened and Danny rushed out to help him inside, Kalith stopped. She released Jack into Danny's care and stepped back. "Human," she called out. Jack turned, barely able to keep his eyes open. Kalith bowed. It was a Valorian gesture of deepest respect. A bow that her kind only gave to those they considered true warriors. "I was wrong about your people," she said. "You may be soft, you may be fragile, but you are not weak. You are the strangest and most terrifying creatures I have ever met." Jack smiled through cracked and bleeding lips. "You should visit Earth sometime. You would fit right in." Then the shuttle doors closed, and darkness finally claimed him. Jack woke up 3 days later, in a medical bay that was not his own. The room was large and white, filled with equipment that looked far more advanced than anything on the Starfall. Soft blue light filtered through windows that showed a view of the floating city outside. He tried to sit up and was surprised to find that his body actually obeyed. He looked down at his arms and saw smooth, healed skin, where deep cuts had been just days before. "Valorian medical technology," a familiar voice said. They may be warriors, but they know how to put people back together. Jack turned his head and saw Katie sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes, and her hair pulled back in a messy knot. But she was smiling. "Katie," he said. His voice was rough, his throat dry. "How long was I out?" "3 days. She stood and poured him a glass of water from a container on the bedside table. "You almost died, Jack. The Valorian doctors said they had never seen a creature take so much damage and keep fighting. They said your body should have shut down long before the fight ended." Jack took the water and drank deeply. The cool liquid felt wonderful against his parched throat. "What happened after I passed out?" "Jack. What happened after I passed out?" Katie sat back down. Her smile faded into something more serious. "Everything happened. The whole galaxy watched you spare Calith's life. It was broadcast to hundreds of worlds. Nobody could believe it. The humans won, and then they showed mercy. It was all anyone could talk about. And the Council? The High King kept his word. Humanity has been granted full standing in the Galactic Council. We have voting rights, trade access, everything. What would have taken centuries, you accomplished in 1 hour." Jack let out a long breath. He had done it. Against all odds, against every expectation, he had done what Earth had sent him to do. "There's more," Katie said. "After the fight, representatives from a dozen different species came to the ship asking to meet with you. The Luminari want to establish a cultural exchange program. The Thaxians want to discuss a military alliance. Even the Korath, and they don't talk to anyone, they sent a message saying they were impressed." "Impressed by what?" "I nearly died." Katie shook her head. "You don't understand, Jack. They weren't impressed that you won. They were impressed that you showed mercy afterward. Most of these species have been fighting wars for thousands of years. They have forgotten what it means to offer kindness to a defeated enemy. You reminded them." The door to the medical bay opened, and Danny walked in carrying a datapad. His face lit up when he saw Jack awake. "Commander, you're up." He rushed over to the bedside. "Sir, you need to see the messages we've received. There must be hundreds of them. Species from all over the galaxy want to talk to humanity. They want to know more about us. About our history, our culture, everything." Jack took the datapad and scrolled through the messages. Danny was right. There were hundreds. Messages of congratulation. Messages of curiosity. Messages offering friendship and alliance. More attention than humanity had received in its entire 60 years among the stars. "One more thing," Danny said. His voice became more hesitant. "Princess Calith requested a private audience with you before we leave. She's waiting outside." Jack and Katie exchanged looks. "Send her in," Jack said. Katie stood. "I'll give you some privacy." She squeezed his hand once before leaving, Danny following behind her. A moment later, Calith entered the room. She looked different from the last time Jack had seen her. Her scales had regained their deep purple color, and she moved with her usual grace. But there was something changed in her eyes. Something softer. She stood at the foot of his bed and said nothing for a long moment. Then, she bowed again. The same deep bow of respect she had given him in the arena. "Commander Morrison, I came to speak with you before you leave." Jack nodded. "What did you want to say?" Calith hesitated. For the first time since he had met her, she seemed uncertain. "I have been thinking about what happened," she said finally. "About what you said. About what you did. I have never lost a fight before. I did not know what defeat felt like. I expected it to feel like shame, like destruction, but it did not." "What did it feel like?" She looked at him with those golden eyes. "It felt like learning, like waking up from a long sleep and seeing the world clearly for the first time." She walked to the window and looked out at the city below. "My people have lived by the code of strength for 10,000 years. We believed that power was the only thing that mattered. That mercy was weakness. That compassion was failure. She turned back to face him. You showed me that we were wrong. Jack said nothing. He simply listened. Your people are terrifying, Kaleth continued. Not because of your weapons or your technology. Those are primitive by our standards. You are terrifying because you break, but you do not stop. You bleed, but you do not fall. You win, but you do not destroy. She walked closer to his bed. I have spent my entire life believing that strength meant crushing others. You showed me a different kind of strength. The strength to keep fighting when your body is broken. The strength to offer mercy when you have earned the right to kill. The strength to make an enemy into a friend. She reached out and touched his hand. Her scales were warm against his skin. My father wants to propose a formal alliance between Valora and Earth, she said. A partnership between our peoples. I came to ask if you think that is something humanity would accept. Jack thought about it. The Valorians were proud and dangerous. A warrior race that had conquered half the galaxy. But they were also learning. They were changing, and they wanted to change together with humanity. I think humanity would be honored, he said. Kaleth smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had ever seen from her. Without mockery or cruelty. Then perhaps our peoples should be friends, Commander Morrison. Jack, he said. My friends call me Jack. Jack, she repeated. Then perhaps I should visit your Earth someday. To learn more about the strange creatures who taught me what true strength really means. He smiled back at her. I think you would like it. We have mountains and oceans and forests. Plenty of things to fight if you get bored. I think it, she laughed. It was a real laugh, full of warmth and life. 2 hours later, Jack stood on the observation deck of the Starfall as the ship prepared to leave Valora Prime. Katie was at the helm, running through the departure checklist. Danny was at his communications station, still sorting through the mountain of messages that continued to pour in. Jack looked out at the alien world below. The purple clouds, the acid seas, the floating cities filled with warriors who had spent their lives believing that might made right. He had come here expecting hostility. He had found something else entirely. The ship lifted off and rose through the atmosphere. Valora Prime grew smaller in the window. Just another world among countless others. But something had changed. Something fundamental. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. They had earned their place not through conquest, not through domination, but through something far more difficult. They had earned it by refusing to give up, by enduring when others would have fallen, by showing mercy when they had every right to destroy. The stars stretched out before them, cold and vast and full of possibility. Somewhere out there, hundreds of species were talking about what had happened on Valora Prime. They were asking questions about humanity. They were wondering what kind of creatures could take so much punishment and keep standing. Jack smiled as the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed. The galaxy was a big place, full of wonders and dangers that humanity had barely begun to explore. But they were ready now. They had proven themselves. And somewhere behind them, growing smaller in the distance, a princess with 4 arms and purple scales was already planning her trip to Earth. The future was bright, and humanity was just getting started.